Mr. Trump, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Good to be here.
Yeah, so you've got this new book out, Triggered. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote that book and what's in it.
Well, listen, I wrote the book because, after the experience I've been on for the last, let's call it 4 years, the sort of incredible roller coaster of the greatest political upset in history, to then go into being the #2 target of the Mueller investigation, to all of these things I've got to see. I started telling stories from the road, from our childhood, on the campaign trail, and people started saying, you gotta really put this all in a book. You really gotta, write this all down one day. And I just finally took the time to do it.
Mr. Trump, you've emerged yourself as kind of a figure in the conservative movement. How do you see the emergence of that, and how do you see yourself within that movement itself? You've defended your father, but also a campus cultural figure, a real icon of the American right. Why do you think that you've become that, and do you feel comfortable in that position?
Listen, I feel comfortable in the position because I'm vocal. I think the reality is, as my father has been for conservatives, he's sort of been the first guy to actually fight. Meaning there's plenty of guys that talk about it. There's guys that go on TV and do a great shtick, about their conservative principles and all the things they're fighting for. But when they're actually called to task, they typically just fold, right? It took me probably 41 years to realize I was a lot more like my father than I ever thought. But you back us in a corner for too long, and we'll come out fighting. So, I think it's more indicative of the right has been starving for that figure who is willing to fight. It's why Trump has the approval rating he does with conservatives. He's shown others that you can do that. You don't just have to take the loss because the left would like you to, or because some publication is going to write a mean article about you. He's sort of taken that, well, we'll talk about our principles in a back room and then we'll actually go fight for them. And that hasn't been the case. That's not the sort of Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, School of American Politics. Like, we'll sit there and we'll talk about the comma on page 5,276, of a policy piece we've never actually read and don't understand anyway. But we won't actually act. The American public, and certainly the conservative side, has been starved for a fighter. And now they got that. And I think, again, I got a little bit of that gene myself, which has probably allowed me to come out there as I've been out there just fighting for my father.
Who do you see as the figures most opposed to your father in the Republican Party?
Well, I think there's sort of the standard establishment types. I've listed them, out there already. I mean, obviously, a Romney type who's just tried to be, the cognizant anti-Trump. And yet when I'm in Utah, all the people are like, I love what your father's doing for X, meaning his constituents love what he's done for their beliefs. Understanding that for some of them, especially in like the LDS community, hey, he may not be the perfect vessel. He may not be as, nice as everyone would always like him to be. Guess what, guys? Like, I don't want Mr. Nice, negotiate. We had Mr. Nice in the Obama presidency, and the media got to take an 8-year vacation because anything he did was just great. I want someone who's actually tough. I need someone who's tough to keep us safe, to fight for our economy, to put up the job numbers that he's been doing, to put up literally, the first fight for conservative movements. And then when you look at the results, it's like, wow, sure, everyone's, we're actually winning. Unemployment numbers are at all-time lows for literally every demographic in the country. Business startups at all-time highs. 6.3 million people off of food stamps. I mean, these are wonderful things, but it's not just conservative platform stuff. I mean, prison reform. Where were all the left that talk about all, they love to play up victim culture, but they didn't fight for these things.
Do you see that as a major victory of your father's presidency?
I do, because you know what? It shows he's not just doing things that the right wants him to do or the Trump base. I can assure you there's not a lot of the Trump base that either loved or cared about that. It wasn't a political thing for the right. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And we also need that president who's not just purely partisan in those ways, but is doing things that are the right thing for the American people. And as he said in 2016, he's got to be the president for all Americans, not just the ones that voted for him.
So you're talking a lot about in the defense of your father. You've talked now about some figures within the Republican Party. There have actually been fights within the administration itself. I mean, do you view that as a problem that there appear to be, recent news reports, of course, that there are figures in your father's White House that were trying to subvert his will or his policies? Do you think that that's a problem?
I do. I think it's a major problem because that is directly subverting the will of the people. That's not just Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and the hoax version 4.0 or whichever one we're on at this point. That is a real problem. But I think what it is they see sort of the establishment culture being attacked, and they're saying, well, in 5 years when Trump's not there anymore, do we go back to that establishment? And if we buy in fully to Trumpian and sort of conservatism today, does that mean we won't be welcome later on? And that's the reality. I mean, people think they know better. They haven't done it. They were never elected, but they think they know better. But it's really more about covering their future in sort of the uncertainty of what happens after the age of Trump.
Right, and as we speak, there's actually a new book, The Anonymous Author, of course, right? He's come out, apparently record pre-sale numbers. Do you have a message for that anonymous author?
Well, man up, come out. Just, say it. The reality is, I mean, I've already seen some of the things when even the New York Times gave it a review, like, I don't know, when the New York Times is eye-rolling on a thing that's obviously set up to be a hit piece on Trump, you see that. I mean, Mike Pence was obviously very active in, trying to exercise the 25th Amendment to throw out I don't know, man. I spent a lot of time with Mike Pence. Mike Pence is the first guy, if something happens in my family or to my kids, I mean, he's the first guy to call me. He's not like, this is the White House operator, hold for the VP. It's him on the phone. I mean, that's not his style. He's not doing those things. But again, the media will build it up to be the greatest, book ever written because it's going to be a hit on Trump. And that's what we've seen. We've seen a media that's not just left-leaning anymore. They've just made a cognizant decision to be the marketing arm of the Democrat Party, and they've given up the pretense of objectivity, which was always in question.
Who in particular in the media are the most egregious in your
Well, listen, I mean, I can point to any of them, but honestly, the reality is today, the biggest and what would have probably been the most credible before Trump are the ones that are just sort of going down the rabbit hole of insanity. I mean, when I look at the Washington Post, when they can take the killing of al-Baghdadi, okay, a guy that's doused journalists in gasoline and lit them on fire. They have a lot of problem when anything else happens with that, right? The New York Times writes, articles about hate towards journalism. When someone does a cartoon meme, they don't talk about physical violence against Trump supporters coming out of a Minnesota rally. That's what it is. When the Washington Post can turn a raping, murdering piece of garbage into an austere religious scholar, because he was sort of on Trump's wish list, like another promise made, promise kept. That's pretty sick. I mean, that's truly deranged. And so, while my father got a lot of hell for sort of saying the media is the enemy of the people, you start seeing stuff like that, and honestly, do you not wonder, hey, do these people really, are they not? I'd love to believe that they aren't, but man, you see that day in and day out. The New York Times fact checks the meme with a gold paw going around the dog to see if it was, in fact, giving some sort of canine version of the. I mean, come on, man.
So the final question I have for you, Mr. Trump, what do you think the GOP looks like after your father? What does it look like on a policy level? Does it include you? What does it look like?
Well, listen, my only focus, people ask me that a lot, my only focus is 2020. I want another 4 more years of this because I want to be able to continue to take on the establishment. I want someone who will actually fight to do it, who's not just going to roll over and die because the other side would like them to. And the future of the GOP, I think if they want to win elections, they're going to have to get that way themselves. There are guys that are doing it. There are people that are emerging that are willing to sort of take that fight to the people. And then there's those
Who do you think those guys are?
Well, listen, I think it should be self-explanatory. Sure. And then there's those that are willing to go on, on TV every night and give a great speech, but then do nothing. And so I think the future of the GOP is going to be men of action who fight, not men of talk who talk about fighting.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.